All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Unemployed AF Dad, Adam and Leslie. And we are so honored to have a special guest today, Mr. Wes Hughes. Thanks for joining.
Thank you guys.
Have you met
Thank
my wife, Leslie, by the way?
Um,
I don't think formally we've been
no,
introduced.
no. I managed in the brief time that I lived with you to avoid all. So
Mm-hmm.
For those
Yeah.
that.
of you who don't know, Wes is married to Leslie's younger sister, Adrian.
Mhm.
So
And
that's the connection here.
that's the connection, and we've known him for a little bit. But
Yeah,
just really appreciative of you coming on. We've wanted to get you on the podcast for a while. Certainly going to let you kind of tell your story and talk, but little background, Wes started his alcohol-free journey like what, 2 weeks before us back in April of 2022?
yeah. I think it was like the 12th.
12th, yeah, and we were like
Yeah.
the 23rd, so yeah, right around there. But yeah, I think we kind of have a little bit of a similar story, so I've been wanting to get you on for a while and just kind of talk about it. And but yeah, let's just kind of dive right in. Just kind of let everybody know your drinking history and kind of what led to your decision to stop drinking.
Okay, so it kind of goes back to high school because in high school I didn't drink. I was too scared with like sports, and I didn't want to get caught, and my parents, and um, so I just kind of, you know, didn't really drink in high school. Well, then I graduated, and that's kind of when, you know, I'd say it all started. I'd say the summer before college. I'd go camping and we'd get some beer and we'd just, as I went to college, it got a lot worse because my roommates were older than I was, and he. I don't want to say like he was a big partier because I don't think he was, but he was older and he enjoyed drinking, so I've gotten a very addictive personality, and so I started, I'd already drank a few times, and then I was kind of like, oh, I don't have my parents here. I can kind of do it when I want.
Mhm.
We were all in like the same apartment complex, so we were all, walking to each other's places all the time. So it was really easy. And then it just kind of like progressed from there. As I got older, then I turned 21 and I could start buying it on my own, which made it more accessible and a lot easier as well. Plus, I had no responsibilities at that time. I think I had just stopped going to school because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Um, and so I really didn't have any sort of like anything that was, holding me back as far as like classes or anything. I just kind of was doing my own thing and working at a bar, which also factored into it all.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Because, you're around it all the time and customers want to, buy you a shot, and um, you get off work and, you get free beer and stuff. So I ended up managing a bar, which kind of, again, kept it going, I'd say even more. So basically, from the time that I was 18, alcohol was prevalent, and then just kind of became more and more prevalent and more accessible and easier. And I would say more accepted. Like it was kind of weird if you didn't
Mm-hmm.
drink, sort of a thing.
Well, especially being a bartender, like that's
Yeah,
unheard of
yeah,
for a bartender not to drink, right?
yeah. I mean, you would show up. There'd be times that we'd show up at like 10:30 in the morning to like prep for the day, and like we'd all do a shot before the shift started. It was just a normal thing. I don't know, and I never
It's
thought
just the
anything of it.
culture. Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, and then I ended up, working a couple other jobs in restaurants, and again, you're kind of in that environment. I think um,
Well, you work in late nights, and yeah,
working like
afterwards,
yeah.
everybody wants to go out or do something. Yeah,
Well, and,
exactly.
and like I said, like you'd close down and like you would get a couple free drinks, and uh, it was just kind of almost like what you looked forward to at the end of the night, right?
Hmm.
Like you've been serving that stuff all day to people, so now it's like, okay, it's my turn, right? But the problem, it's 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, whatever it
Yeah.
is. So, uh,
Kind of goes back to
yeah,
that reward factor, right? Like you've worked all day,
right, right.
now I get to get my reward.
And I would say the difference though is like when I was younger doing that, like I didn't necessarily like think like, okay, I just got to make it to the end of my shift and then I can drink. It was
Mm-hmm.
kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm done work and I can have a drink now. And maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
because the job was kind of like upbeat and fast paced and
Mm-hmm.
everything, and I'm talking to people, so like it wasn't something that I thought about. Whereas when I started working like an 8 to 5,
Mhm.
like, yeah, I'd be like, man, I just want to get off work and have a beer. Like, it's been a long day, it's been a stressful day, whatever it might be. Um, and I
And
really
then
thought
and then you're
that,
like not present in the moment too. Like all throughout the
correct.
day, you're not really present because you're thinking about, oh, when I get off, then I'm going to have my reward
Well, and I think that COVID probably made it worse
for
because you're at
sure.
home. So, like, you're, you know, 300 feet from your fridge and you can just go grab a beer or whatever.
Mhm.
And, like, really, they might not know if you have one beer during the day. But so
Happy
that was,
hour starts early and earlier.
yeah. And I think that was kind of like a hard part because, like, you're like, well, it is just right there, right? Like, it is so
Mhm.
accessible. Um, and I really thought that once I had kids, the drinking would slow down,
Yeah.
but I don't know if it necessarily increased because I still drank quite a bit before I had kids. Any occasion that I found an excuse for, and then after I had kids, it was almost like, well, it's been a long day, so now I get time to unwind. And what do you do when you unwind? Like, you sit back and you have a drink. Like,
Mhm.
that's just normal, right? I'd say it's kind of ingrained in our society to, like, oh, you've had a long day, you drink. You're celebrating something, you have a drink. Like, you want to unwind, you have a drink, right? You don't sit there and
Absolutely.
ever think like, man, you want to unwind, like, sit in those emotions and process the day and reflect on how the day went. Like, nobody ever tells you to do that, right?
Or like you want to unwind by going and exercising or, like
Correct.
lifting
Yeah.
weights or something. Yeah.
So, um, it really kind of all came to a head, I think, obviously April 12th of last year, because it was right around Easter. And I think it was, I don't think it was the Sunday. I think it was the Monday. I'm not entirely positive. But, uh, basically, like, I had drank the night before and I had had too many drinks, and I woke up the next morning and, like, I was like dog tired. And
Mhm.
like, ended up calling into work and stuff. And like, that's like, once Adrian woke up, that's when she kind of talked to me about it, because, like, I fell asleep on the couch and um just did things that weren't normal, like left lights on, all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of when, like, it kind of all got put, I'd say, into perspective. And Adrian was never to the point where she was like, you have to quit drinking. She was just kind of like, we need to, like, maybe take a break for a little bit or something, or just kind
Yeah.
of evaluate it. Because, again, going into the addictive personality, like, if I had one, I wanted to have five. And it's that way with anything. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
we had pizza last night. We made some pizza, and, like, I wasn't gonna have just one slice. Like, I'm gonna have 4 or 5 slices. Like, that's just how I am. So, yeah, I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna quit drinking. And she was like, okay, and I think she believed me. I think part of her wanted to believe me, but I don't really know that I gave her a full reason to be like, yeah, he's serious, because of in the
Mhm.
past, like, I mean, I've said things before, and never along the lines of quitting drinking, but I feel like I've said things or said I was interested in things and, like, never followed through with it. So I'm sure this kind of felt like one of those times, but I just kind
Yeah.
of
Like,
evaluated now.
we'll wait and see. Yeah. You say that
Yeah,
more or
yeah.
less. Yeah, exactly.
Because, I mean, we did a dry January, like, X amount of years ago, and,
Hmm.
like, I held through with it. Like, we didn't have any issues there. Um, but I just remember kind of, like, thinking about things and being like, man, like, you've had these sort of things that have happened recently. Like, you've been I'd been wanting to try to stop for a while. I just kind of always found an excuse not to, or um, let something, like, dictate it, basically. Like, oh, you were upset, so let's go have a beer. Or, oh, you're gonna go work this beer fest, like, you're gonna drink there, so we'll
Mm.
wait until June. Well, in June we have, XYZ coming up, vacation. Like, you can't quit. You can't start quit not drinking then. And so, but no, I told myself, like, hey, this isn't really mixed with my lifestyle. And so I stopped, and, like, haven't ever really had an urge to drink since then, which I think is um, kind of, I think that you're along those same lines as me, Adam. But I think it's kind of
Yeah.
uncommon. And I'm very fortunate in that I never really had a temptation afterwards to, like, grab a drink. And I think it was because of the, like, shame and embarrassment that I felt, that last time, that I was like, this is just not good. Plus,
Yeah.
like, again, kids. And I've always been weird about, like, alcohol around kids, because I don't want them to Like,
You
I
don't
don't
want
want
to
them to
model
think,
that behavior.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't
Yeah.
want them to think it's normal because when I was growing up, it
Mm.
wasn't. We didn't have
Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
alcohol in our house all the time, and like I had a cabinet that had bourbon in it and stuff, and like I never had that as a kid growing up. So
Yeah.
trying to, I guess, be the role model too, and so it kind of just all came to a head, and I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna quit drinking, and so um, I did. I haven't really looked back,
Yeah.
and it's been great. So
I think that's interesting going back to when you said, I have an addictive personality. If I was going to have one drink, I was going to have five. That's how I was too, because we've
Mhm.
talked about moderation before.
Mhm.
I'm not fully convinced that moderation is a thing. Maybe
Yeah,
for some people it truly is. I don't know, but for me it never was. And I think when you're talking about alcohol, it's a very addictive drug, and
it is.
people who can moderate, I would question like how long can you moderate? Because when we talked to Matt, when we had him on a month or so ago, he said depending on where you're at in your drinking, I would say moderation is just not something that you can do, because the longer you kind of mess with that drug, the more chances you are to become dependent on it. So I think that is relatable to a lot of people who have drank for, quite a while. The more you drink, the less you can moderate, because number one, you start to build up a tolerance. So one
Mhm.
just doesn't do it for you anymore. You need at least, two, three, maybe four. But also again, you're forming that dependence on it. And it's really challenging to moderate that. And then going back to what you said, kind of about just lost my train of thought. What was I know I should be writing this stuff down as you talked.
I mean, I
No,
spoke for a very long time, so
no,
I'm.
no. I got it now. Just light bulb. You were talking about when you stopped drinking, and it really wasn't that difficult for you once you made that decision. I've talked about that a little bit in the past too. Like, not to say that it was super easy. I mean, there were some challenges along the way, but it never got to the point for me, and I don't think it really did for you, because we've talked about this, where you're like, oh, I've got to have a drink. Like,
Mhm.
you had to like talk yourself out of it. Maybe like a fleeting moment, like, oh, a drink would sound good, but then you're just like, okay, but I'm not going to. Like, it's not even a temptation. It's just more like maybe
A moment.
a moment, right? Or like you are around people that are
Mhm.
drinking, and you have that flashback to maybe when you were drinking, and a good time that you had, and you're like, oh yeah, but it's never like a struggle, like, going back and forth, like, should I have this drink? No,
Yeah.
should I,
And some
um
people really do, because I know
some people do,
Lauren
yeah.
had spoke about that when
Mhm.
she was on the podcast, of just kind of, being with friends. Also, too, like, she's much younger than us too, so she was immersed in that culture.
Wes, did you ever have any moments early on after you decided to stop drinking that you were in a setting that there was alcohol, and how did
Oh yeah.
that affect you?
So we went to I went to a vacation with my parents in May. So I
Oh
mean, it was
yeah,
like
yeah.
6 weeks probably, I'd say, if that. And my my family, they don't drink like a ton, but like they were on vacation in Florida
Hmm.
and they wanted to have a few drinks, and so I mean, I was around it almost every day. Plus, we've been going to the same spot since my parents were little. And my grandma went there, and my grandma loved makers, and she loved gin and tonics
Hmm.
and pina coladas and stuff. So I think that part of it too is when my parents were down there, they kind of like like it's
Honor her
Yeah,
memory.
and
yeah in a
remembrance,
way.
yeah.
So when I went down there, they would ask me if I wanted a beer, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna. I don't really want
Hmm.
anything, and I ended up getting some NA beers. But again, it wasn't ever anything that I was like I felt tempted by. And I'm
Yeah.
super, like I said, I'm super fortunate because I've talked to people who have tried to quit drinking, and they're like, yeah, it took me X amount of times, which it still took me,
Mhm.
more than just once. It wasn't like I was
Mhm.
just like, well,
Sure.
I'm drinking and I'm done. Like there were times before that I wanted to stop, and um,
Did your family support you?
huh?
Did your family support you?
Yeah, I think at first they were kind of like what, like why, and they were like,
Mm.
just try this, and they didn't really understand it. I don't know that I've ever fully opened up to them about it all because
Uh-huh.
um, that's just probably like an emotional block that I have that I will eventually get through. I think
Mhm.
I've talked to them a little bit about it, but they didn't really know why. So if they knew the why, they wouldn't have asked me. They wouldn't have
Mhm.
said, "Hey, you want to
Mhm.
try this or whatever." But I mean, there were times they'd be like, "Oh, try this," or "Dad made this, so try it, whatever." Like, "Dad
Mhm.
brewed this beer, taste it." Um, but then after a while, they just kind of were like, "Okay, it's not going to happen." And I had friends prior to that too that like I would go over to like their house or whatever, and like they wouldn't have a drink because I'm there, and I'm like, "Guys, I'm not fragile. Like,
Right, yeah, like,
be
this is
calm.
my decision,
Yeah,
doesn't mean it has to be
you
yours,
can have a
right.
drink." And
Mhm.
I almost took it as like an insult of like, you don't think that I'm strong enough to be around it, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
So,
yeah,
Right.
but then I also understand like my their mindset of like, hey, I'm going to support you in this sort of.
yes.
Right.
So there were two ways to kind of look at that, and um, at that time, I'm still trying to figure out how to function, I guess, without alcohol. Not like on a daily basis, but like
Mhm.
how to process
And
emotions and
yeah, or be
how
in
to feel
social
all that
settings,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
like that's a great point though, Wes, that you bring up like how to process emotions because I think a lot of times people will drink to, there's a lot of emotion behind it. And so instead of confronting that, it's like, well, I'm just going to drink so I can numb and
mhm,
suppress and push that down. And I don't have to deal with that if I'm disassociated with alcohol.
yeah.
And like, is that something that you did like
I
frequently
mean, yeah. I
or
mean, there
like
were.
on a very unconscious basis?
Yeah. I mean, I always drank to. I would say there were times that I drank to escape. There were times that I
Mm-hmm.
drank because
Yeah.
of like it was a good time. There were. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there were always times in like I, you drink because like you enjoy the feeling that you get when you're drunk or you're buzzed. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
that's why most
Sure.
people drink. If they
Sure.
drink because they just like the taste of beer, there's no alcohol options out there. Like
Right. Right.
I
You're
mean,
right.
and that's part of like what I used to say too. Is like I was like, oh, I just like the taste of beer, and so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, if you really like the taste of beer, then why does it have to have alcohol in it? And it's
Right.
like,
Right.
whatever feeling. So like, you drink to escape whatever, or to get into like super you when you're drunk or whatever it might be. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're always going to be hiding your emotions or escaping emotions
Mm-hmm.
or subconsciously trying to get away from something um, when you drink because you're trying to get out of your normal state of being, like what you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, there were times that I drank to for escape. There were times that I drank because I just didn't want to put up with it or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it might
Mhm.
be. And like whenever I stopped drinking, like yeah, Adrian and I had to kind of like relearn our relationship. Like I had to kind of relearn my relationship with my wife and my
That's
relationship
relatable,
with kids.
yeah.
And I mean, whatever it is, like you're kind of relearning it because I mean, for me, it was a 12-year period of my life. Like it was almost
Mm-hmm.
half my life. I felt like had alcohol in it, and so I'm
And
trying
you
to.
guys met, you and Adrian met at Touch at a
At a
bar,
bar, yeah.
that you guys worked at together. So like your relationship began with alcohol and sustained. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously when you have kids and stuff, things slow down a bit, but that was just a part of the culture between the two of
yeah,
you. And you hadn't really had a marriage that was sober. Very relatable,
Yeah.
to Adam and I. And this year has been, I mean, there's been like some difficult times when we're just like, man, we are relearning what marriage is. We're
yeah,
relearning how to connect with each other, how to be present with really uncomfortable emotions together, and how to verbally process them and not just, try and either like brush it under the rug or, disassociate in some way from that.
Or
mhm,
even, like, have, like, date nights without our trips that don't revolve
Yes.
around drinking, like,
Yeah.
what do we do
Like we're
now that
sober
we're
the
not
entire time.
drinking? Yeah.
Like,
Well,
wait, what all are we gonna do?
and like for me, what I started to notice was like I kind of wanted to go back to like childhood. Like that was like where I wanted to go back because I wanted to feel that kind of security, and I think that in a way I wanted to kind of relearn who I was.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah,
I
that's
would say
beautiful.
that it started prior to even Franklin being born, which is 21. So I mean, you got to
Mhm.
think there that like there was well over a year where I think subconsciously I was preparing myself for this
Mhm.
because like whenever he was coming, I found Adrian's old Game Boy, and I was like, "This is awesome." I found one of her old Pokemon games, and I was like, "I want to play this." And I played it as a kid, and I loved it. And so like it didn't work. So like I bought a refurbished version online, and like I played that for like a couple of weeks, and then there were just other things I did along the way where I was like kind of connecting back to my childhood, which was pre-alcohol Wes, and
Mhm.
I think kind of getting back in touch with myself, which is partially why like when I said I was done drinking, like why it made it so easy for me, because it was just um I was already prepared, like I was mentally there.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so I had to kind of relearn myself as well. And then by doing that, I was able to relearn Adrian and relearn Phyllis and Franklin and um I mean a whole lot of stuff. Goes into relationships with my brother, my parents. I mean, heck, even my brother-in-laws and in-laws. I mean, there's times that
Mhm.
like you wonder, like obviously not with you, Adam, because you were on the same journey.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's times that like you wonder, like, am I going to get ridiculed for not drinking or for whatever? And luckily, Craig and Art are both the kind of people that like, hey, I'm not going to have a drink. That all right, like
Yeah.
Mhm.
no big deal, sort of a thing. I mean, Art might joke around with us, but it's out of love and not out of like is like
True
some
animosity.
yeah,
Yeah.
like making me mad that you're not drinking, sort of thing. So
Right, right.
Yeah, that brings up a good question. Like when, because I know I've talked about this when I stopped drinking, I did have a few people kind of ask why. Like, and the first thought is if you decide to stop drinking, that means you must have had a problem, right? Like, why would you stop drinking if you
Mm,
didn't have a problem? That's always what it seems to be the first thought. And I would,
sure.
I would always say, well, again, that's a problem can look different to many different people, but you don't necessarily have to have a problem or hit a rock bottom to decide like, hey, alcohol isn't serving me. I like my life better without it, and
mhm.
that's why I'm quitting. But did you have anybody who kind of questioned and it was like, well, why are you an alcoholic or do you have a drinking problem when you told them you weren't drinking anymore?
um, Not so much, because the people that I have in my life, I'm pretty close with and already open with, and so like
Yeah.
I didn't really have any issues just up front telling them like, this is what's happened, and or this is how I've been feeling. But then also I started doing triathlons, and so um, I was pretty competitive with them, and I really enjoyed doing them, and I was getting better and better the more that I did, and so for people who I didn't know too well, I would just tell them like, "Oh, I race triathlons. Like, I don't, I'm trying to do whatever, and so I just
Right.
drink."
Yeah, nice to
But
have that of because people aren't going to question that, right?
Yeah.
Like you want
Oh,
to be
that makes
in
sense.
peak physical shape. So, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I remember there was one time, and this is a time that really stuck out to me. And it's nothing like negative or anything, but it was when I was kind of like, maybe my parents don't know that like I'm serious about not drinking again. Because I went to a tournament with my dad, a golf tournament that he was working. We went to his tent, and it was they had friends who whatever like owned the tent, and it was like a corporate one, and so there was alcohol. I mean, the free alcohol, and there was free food. Um, and one of the ladies was like, "Hey, let me get you a drink." My dad's like, "No, I'm working," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm good." And my dad goes, "Yeah, he races triathlon, so he's not drinking for now." And I was kind of like, "Well, I've told you like I'm just not drinking anymore," but that was when it was kind of like, and maybe it's a product of who I was as a person, of like saying I was going to do something and not following through with it. I don't
Mhm.
remember those times like very vividly, but maybe it was just one of those things. Maybe it's my parents weren't really accustomed to like being around people who had a life without alcohol. Not that their friends are
Hmm.
Mhm.
alcoholics or anything, 'cause that's not obviously the case. And that's not the stigma around it, but like you just don't get a lot of people now who don't drink, and
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
maybe they're just
You're
kind of like,
right.
oh, he's taking a break or whatever. Because again, I mean, they knew my track record and my history of um, like really enjoying like the taste of beers and breweries and everything.
Sure.
So,
Hmm.
but that time really stuck out with me, and I was like, well, like on the surface, like it's okay, it's acceptable to tell people that, like, hey, he races, but like
Right.
deep down, if you're like, well, he just doesn't drink, I'm afraid that you know maybe they don't say that, because then they'll either question themselves, or the person who you told will start questioning things, or
Yeah, like,
uh,
"Ooh, I wonder what happened. I wonder what that story
yeah,
is."
or
You
even
know?
question why they drink themselves. And again,
Yeah.
We've talked
when
about
Oh,
you do
that.
yeah.
It makes people uncomfortable.
yeah,
It
when
Yeah.
you do that uncomfortability that comes with like self reflection and
Yep.
Mhm.
everything else, and so it's just easier and more acceptable, to put it in another way, to have an excuse, sort of
Yeah.
thing. So
You mentioning triathlons and golf, and that kind of is a good segue into something I wanted to mention about sports in general, because you and I have had this conversation a lot.
Mhm.
There is this kind of association in our society with sports and alcohol.
Oh yeah.
And especially when it comes to men, like you think about going to sporting events and having drinks, or getting together with your buddies and watching a game and having drinks, and you know, it just seems to be one with the other. And I know for you that was kind of a struggle, like watching sports without the alcohol. And it was for me too, because that's just what I did. That was my routine. I
Yeah.
would go downstairs, turn on a game, and grab a drink.
Yeah, and uh, as you know, I'm a diehard Chiefs fan. So
Right.
yeah, which is nowhere near the truth. But I think when I drank, sports became a lot bigger to me than they should have been.
Yeah.
Um, and they were like life at that point. Like I would drink and I'd just get so invested in my team, and then I would start
Mhm.
saying like negative things about other people, or just kind of making. I don't know the language that I can use on this show, so we'll just tone it down. But kind of making a butt face of myself, I would say. Um, and like I said, like it was almost like sports would dictate like my life for a while. I mean, when the Blues
Yeah.
won the cup, like yeah, I celebrated. When the
Oh,
Chiefs
me
won
too,
the
man.
Super
Me
Bowl,
too.
yeah, when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, I was butthurt and everything. Um, and so actually, sports was kind of a weird topic because um, I had been trying to get away from that, and again, it took being in my emotions and being emotionally present for me to realize like that I need to detach myself. Like, don't get me wrong, I still cheer for the Cardinals and the Blues and all them, and the
But you
49ers.
have it, you put it in perspective now.
Yeah, it puts it in perspective, and like they're just people. It's just a sport, right? So
Yeah.
like I don't have the disdain for the Chiefs or the Cubs or whoever it might be, because I've learned to appreciate the sport for what it is. Now, going to a sporting event is a little different because there aren't really like any NA options at games.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, I'm hoping that changes, because you and I are pretty big NA fans, and we've
Yeah.
seen kind of the emergence of really good NAs in the last few
Mhm.
years, and I hope that it does start to kind of trend towards sporting events, because I mean, I have memories of going to sporting events with my dad when I was a kid, and I will, if my kids want to go to sporting events, I want to be able to take them and not be around a bunch of drunks, and
Yeah.
just the ruckus that sometimes you tend to see at sporting events as people drink more and more. So yeah, I agree. I wish there was a few more NA options at sporting events. I mean, it'd probably be like $14 for one, but
For half a cup. But it also
right,
brings to the table again, going back to how much do people like the sport and how much do they enjoy the excuse to drink?
yeah,
Hmm.
You
yep,
know, I mean, and that was something that I've dealt with and something that I've learned about. Like, there were times that like I would drink even if my team wasn't playing because it was a good game or whatever it might be.
hmm
And now I find myself like at night being like all excited for it, and then I turn on, and I'm like, well, I'd rather watch this documentary about functional mushrooms, or I'd rather do this, or I'd rather
You
read
sound
about.
like Leslie.
So I'm just kind of like,
I will watch that documentary with you 100%.
I have been. I don't know too much about them yet, but I am all on board with like
Yeah. Did you
functional
watch oh, what is it? It's the
fantastic
fungus.
fungi.
Yes. Did you watch
Yes,
it?
I
Oh
did.
my god.
Was
My
that
mind was like blown.
Yeah.
Blown.
The
It's
more
like
that
this
I
is
hear about
amazing.
it, and the more that I like read and stuff, like the fact that alcohol is a legal substance and
Yeah.
Mhm.
stuff like psychedelics aren't
Mhm.
absolutely blows my mind. Um,
Mhm.
because alcohol is, and I forget the statistics that I heard, but I know that it's accounted for a majority of cancers last year and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's
then
like the
also
fourth leading cause of death in the US. That might not be right, but it's up there.
it's somewhere.
It's
And well, then people talk about like, with functional, like, or not functional, but like with psychedelics, like, oh, well, it gives you, makes you feel like you're invincible and you can do this and you can do that. Well, what does alcohol do when you're drunk? Like when you're drunk, you have
your
You
zero
are.
impaired
control.
judgment. You think, yeah,
You have zero
exactly.
control, and you drive, and you like
Yeah, that's
you
the
feel
scary
like you're
part.
invincible, and so
I
uh,
don't think that's I mean, psychedelics, I don't, agree that they should be used like on a daily basis or
Right.
anything like that. But
Or
I
medical.
do know that people have done oh, what is it called? A microdosing.
Yep.
And they've had a lot of really good success with microdosing. And if you have, depression, anxiety, any like just trauma that you're trying to work through, it
Mhm.
really helps to bring that stuff to the surface and in a very um like a linear way so that you can process through it rather than kind of just being in this like abyss of emotion and not understanding how to process it.
Mhm.
So I think that there's some really amazing benefits to it. And I actually looked up in like the St. Louis area, there's actually some psychologists that are working with psychedelics. So you can do psychedelics in conjunction with, talk therapy, which, my gosh, could you imagine if you merged those two together, how
Yeah.
much ground you could cover and, change your life and then, change the world. And it's just, yeah, I,
I'll
As
have to
opposed
watch. I'll
to
have to watch
as
this.
opposed to going to a doctor and being like, "Oh, I've got anxiety." Well, here, let me write you this prescription.
Yeah, here's
right?
some
Exactly.
meds.
Here's this to take care
Yeah.
of this symptom rather than like, okay, let's figure out like what the source is. Let's figure out what that root
Mhm.
cause is so that you don't have to live with this for the rest of your life. So you don't have to, deal with this consistently over and over again. Because I don't know about you, but I'm like a definite believer that our body talks to us.
Mm.
And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just if we want to listen or not.
Well, and I personally think in the medical world there's room for like psilocybin and stuff. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the psychedelics do have their place in the medical
Mm-hmm.
world. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to sit here and say like, "Hey, on a Tuesday night, you should be sitting there eating a whole bunch of mushrooms." Like, you're probably doing it for a
No,
different purpose at
definitely
that
not.
point. But
You need to approach it with like honor and reverence for what it is and what it can do for you. It's not something that, yeah, you're just going to sit on your couch and you're not going to, yeah, pop mushrooms so that you can, get high and disassociate, because there you are again.
Yeah,
It's
you're
the
you're
same
shooting to escape
cycle.
something.
Exactly. It's the
Yeah,
same cycle that
just
you
with
have been
alcohol.
in.
Yep.
Exactly. Exactly. So if you're doing it with a trajectory of like healing and wanting to get to the root cause, then yeah, for sure. I'm all in it.
within that documentary, there was Paul Stamets' story, and
Mhm.
um,
With the tree?
I'm talking more about his stutter.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Like when he like, yeah, did all the
Yeah.
mushrooms and then he
Yes.
like that big storm came and he
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
hung on to the tree for like I don't know
And
how
then he
long he
like
said.
connected with his brain, and he was like,
Uh-huh.
his brain was telling him like, "You know how to talk, like you know how to
Mhm.
do it."
Yeah.
And then he
Yeah.
just woke up the next morning and no stutter. Like
Right.
it's just
And he had had it all his life.
like
Wow.
and then his mom having cancer and like her taking turkey tail mushrooms, which
Uh-huh.
are 100%. I mean, like they're legal. I have a drink in the fridge. It's oh gosh, it's they make kombucha and they made this like they call it a mushroom elixir, and it's got like
Mhm.
chaga, reishi, and turkey tail in it, and it tastes
It's
like
just like the coffee we drink, the
Mhm.
Four Sigmatic.
yeah, just like
Mhm.
Yeah.
Four Sigmatic, yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I think yeah, I mean the fact that alcohol is so not only is it prevalent, but like you have it at college events now, and I'm sure it'll probably be a matter of time, and I mean it'll probably be a while, but I'm sure eventually it'll probably be at high school events too, because
Yep.
and
Yep.
You
it's associated in sports and
Yeah.
yeah, so
we've mentioned this before. I don't think we've talked too much in depth about it, but I saw I've seen a few people, but Dr. Amen comes to mind. I saw a video that he posted, and he's convinced that I don't know what the time frame, 5, 10, 15 years, that we'll look back on alcohol just like we look back on cigarettes today and be
Mhm.
like, how did we, number one, think this was okay? And number two, why was it so prevalent in our society? He's convinced that we'll look at alcohol the same way, and I hope that's true. I still think ultimately it's about money, and as long as they're making money, I think they're going to find ways to keep it around. But
yeah,
I think the statistics are coming out that are saying like all these studies before that said alcohol had positive health benefits were incorrect. They were
there's
They're
absolute.
there's
backed
zero
by
amount of
alcohol
They were
alcohol that's
companies.
beneficial for you. I mean,
exactly. I mean, you talked about earlier the association with cancer, and You
Like
know,
Alzheimer's,
yeah, just it increases your chances of getting sick in so many different
Mhm.
ways. Not to even mention just your day to day, you just don't feel very good. We talked
Yeah.
about like how I didn't realize how bad I felt until I stopped drinking. I was like, "Oh, this is how you sleep. This is how you the kind of energy you have every day. Like this is what it's supposed to feel like. This is not how I felt when I was drinking." And then,
Mhm.
I was like you, Wes. I didn't drink every single day, but
Right.
it can carry over because you drink a little bit too much one night and then you're kind of feeling sluggish for the next 2 or 3 days and then you drink again and you repeat the cycle.
So I sent you this quote, and it's one that I really, really liked,
Yeah.
and I'm glad I got the chance to throw it in. So thank you for that lead up. Uh, it says, when you drink, you're borrowing tomorrow's happiness, which
Absolutely.
I like that because like when you think about it, like yeah, when you drink, like you're going to be like I mean, for the most part, most of us are going to be unavailable. I would say for the next day,
Hmm.
depending on how much you drink. Now, obviously, somebody who's listening to this is like, well, I have 1 or 2 beers. Like, yeah, you may not have as big of an effect on you, but yeah, and then like it's one that really resonated with me because I go back and think of a time when I was uh, in a basement and I had a pounding headache for an entire day, and that entire day was gone. Now I didn't have kids at the time, but I laid around, I watched Parks and Rec, I ate Papa John's and drank Wild Cherry Pepsi, and that was like
I think I recall that day actually.
I did. I mean, like that entire day was like it was gone, and it was a day that I could have spent with my wife. It was a day I could have spent with my niece. It was a day I could have spent doing hundreds of other things, but instead I just
Yeah.
couldn't couldn't do anything. And so, yeah, it's a quote that's really stuck out with me. So,
I mean, and there's so many weekends that you look back and as you get older, at least in my case, even the less I drink, still I just didn't feel very good then. I mean, it
yeah,
would only have to be a couple drinks and yeah, I wasn't down for the count the entire day, but you wake up a little bit later, you with a little bit less energy. It takes you a bit longer to get going and you've already lost, maybe 3 or 4 hours of your day that would have
Would
been
have had.
would have been, accomplishing something or enjoying it and why your weekends are so precious for those of us who work in a traditional Monday through Friday job.
Mhm.
I just don't know why you would want to waste those days and I have posted on Instagram before like I've wasted too many weekends already. I'm
Mhm.
not doing it ever
yeah,
again like um
I was looking up that quote comes from it's like an ancient Chinese proverb, but it talks about caffeine, and caffeine borrows energy from tomorrow.
mhm.
You said that, and I was like, oh yeah, yeah, and yeah, that really resonated with me because being caffeine, yeah,
I,
definitely.
I love caffeine, and I
coffee
enjoy
man.
the. I think there are health benefits with caffeine and coffee as long as you have like organically like good like
Right.
cultured
Yeah,
coffee.
without the
Yeah. Yeah.
pesticides and
Um,
chemicals.
It
Yeah,
just spurred that thought, so I was like,
yeah,
I was trying to figure out who said it, but I can't
I think it
remember.
I
was Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss, yeah.
oh the
The
places we'll
ancient
go is
Chinese
caffeine.
Hey,
proverbist.
he was wise.
He was wise.
Um,
Oh my gosh.
no, I also it came down to sort of a like relationship with my kids thing, and then also like respect for my wife because like on the nights that I stayed up and drink, like I wasn't available in the morning to get up
Sure.
early with the kids whenever because young kids they get up early and like to let her sleep or to spend time with them in that those early morning hours or if I did I was not 100% there. I'm like fighting around to get some coffee in me or something and letting
Yep.
them watch TV
Yeah.
whereas um, now I'm more available to get up early to spend time with them. Maybe let her sleep whenever I can, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So um,
Yeah,
I
yeah, you're more like present
I
and
yeah.
available.
I love the schedule that I'm on now that I, don't drink because I think you and I, Wes, were pretty similar in that we like to stay up a little bit later. We used to, because again, it gave us an excuse to maybe like stay up and watch a game and have a few drinks after, our family went to bed. And now I like going to bed when they go to bed because I like being up early. And, I think we were meant to be that way, right? When the sun starts going down, that's when our bodies just start winding
yeah,
down. And the longer you
But you
kind
have
of delay that, then sometimes the
yeah.
harder it is to fall asleep.
That's the whole natural chemical process. Like when the sun is going down, your body naturally releases melatonin,
Hmm.
which tells your brain, "Hey, it's time to shut down. It's time to go to bed," rather than, and then when the sun comes up, tells your brain, hey, it's time to wake up. There's light here.
Yeah.
And
Wes,
there's
is there
books
any?
with it's. I'm reading a book called Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty,
Oh, I love Jay Shetty. His podcast is amazing.
and he said I actually just read a chapter on sleep because Adrian's transitioning to a job where she's getting up super early now.
Mhm.
But anyway, it was talking about like it's something with HGH and your body, and there's a benefit to it, and something happens with the release of it. But the times that you release it most are between 10 and 12. So if you're staying awake
Yes.
at those times,
If you're not asleep during that time,
you're not getting the benefit, that maximum benefit that you could be getting.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I've been obviously on nights that I can, like you said, Adam. I've been trying to go to bed at 9:45 ish.
yeah.
And so anybody listening, don't come to my door at 10 o'clock. And
Won't
then I've
answer.
been trying to wake up with the sunrise because there are benefits to getting up with the sunrise. And I'm a firm believer in technology doesn't really have a place in the bedroom, and like there's you should limit. I
There's a
think
lot of studies that back that
yeah.
up a lot. Yep.
So I'll get up at 5:45 and like I'll turn my alarm off, and if Adrian's texting me, I'll talk to her. But other than that, I put my phone down and like go outside and like you just sit and like you're in nature. Now I'm lucky enough that I have a screen porch, so
and it's so nice too. It's just quiet, and you're just enjoying the sounds and the
yeah.
sunrise.
Well, in
It's
your brain,
beautiful.
like you're giving your brain a chance to wake up. And the way that it was put was if you get up and like you're automatically checking, I think this was Corbin Burns that said it, possibly. But if you're checking like social media and you're doing this and you're doing that, like you're essentially like letting in thousands of people into your life before you've even brushed your
Yes.
teeth or washed your hair.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was like, that's such a good way to put it. And so we're gonna get it in a sunrise alarm clock and see how that goes to where it kind of like when the sun rising, it's mimicking that in your room. But yeah, I mean,
I love that. Yeah, I love that you
there's
brought that up because I just was listening to a Mark Gross podcast, and he was talking about not even just social media, just technology in general, and how our central nervous system was not created to be able to
Mhm.
consume all of the things that are coming at us on a consistent basis. No wonder that anxiety and depression and all these chronic illnesses are through the roof because our bodies cannot handle. The technology can be great. Having information at your fingertips is good, but if you're getting it constantly throughout the day, our bodies just can't handle that, and as a result we are more anxious, we are more depressed because we're not spending as much time out in nature or just in silence with our own thoughts. Like, when was the last time you just sat and thought for a while?
Yeah, you don't.
Not you
You
specifically,
always
but
have some sort of distraction. I mean, unless you like, I've taken to meditation, so I really enjoy meditating. But like, unless you do that, like, no, there is a constant distraction, and I would say technology would be the cause for 99% of like disagreements with Adrian and I because she'll be trying to talk to me and I'll be like focusing on the game, or I'll be trying to talk to her and she'll be like looking at something. Um, it was yesterday. She was looking up something about Taylor Swift, and I was trying to get her attention, and she wasn't responding. And I was like jokingly, I go, "I don't like what Taylor Swift is turning you into."
Leslie's notorious for that. She cannot multitask. If you try to talk to her while she's like on her phone doing something, it's like talking to a brick wall. It's just no response.
Can't multitask like when I'm trying to look for something and like absorb information. I can multitask like take care of the kids and make a meal and things like that. But like no, if I am like searching for something on my phone or I'm looking at something, like that's my attention and that's all I can do. Especially if it's Taylor Swift. I mean, let's be real.
Don't get me started. If you notice it too, like technology is becoming more and more common with younger kids. And like if you watch people going like whenever they're out to dinner at a restaurant, like technology.
Let's just give them an iPad
or whatever.
Yeah.
Or if there's a break in the conversation, people are checking social media. And again, that prompts another quote by Jay Shetty where he said, "Nobody wants to go to dinner with you while you're on your phone," or something like that. And I was like, that's true. I was like, I wouldn't want to go like Like Adam, if you drove down and we went to dinner, and I'm sitting there like on my phone, like doing Facebook, and you're just sitting there like wanting to have a
Sitting in
conversation. Yeah, like it's rude, and it's not something that like we ever
But
did
but
previously. But
that's
it's
but
addictive.
that's what young people are used to now. They're used to their relationships being through a screen,
Oh
and when
yeah,
they are in a real setting where they're across from somebody, they don't know
They
how
don't know
to react. They
Mhm.
don't the body language. They it makes them uncomfortable because they're not used to it,
Mhm.
and that's the scary part. Like again, technology can be great. The fact that we're able to do this through
Mhm.
technology when you're 4.5 hours away is a nice thing. But yeah, when it consistently is part of your life and it replaces being in person with people,
Yeah.
that's when it becomes a little bit of an issue.
Yeah.
And when you allow it to like hijack your brain, which then in turn hijacks your life, and especially when we're giving such a highly addictive thing to small children who, I mean, your prefrontal cortex of your brain is not fully developed until you're 25, and we're giving kids tablets when they're 2,
Which brings the question up: why is legal drinking age 21 when your brain is not
isn't
even
even
fully
fully
developed
developed.
yet?
Yeah, exactly. But
Hmm.
I mean the same thing, like you can make life
You
altering
can,
decisions
yeah,
like going
vote,
into the
you get in the
military
military,
to
buy
vote, to
cigarettes. Yeah,
take out tens of thousands of dollars in student loans,
little on a
I mean,
scam.
like we can go on and on and
Oh
on,
yeah.
but
Operated vehicle because you pass a simple test, like things like that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Like we don't take into consideration that, yeah, 25, your brain is, and even when we do reach 25, like it's not like this like giant epiphany of like, oh, we suddenly make all great decisions because we got married at 25 and we made a lot of very poor decisions from 25 until late 30s,
Yeah.
I mean, so that doesn't even mean that like, you suddenly come online at 25 and, things light up, but I think it does give you a bit of a leg up of the ability to have foresight and be able
Mhm.
to see like, oh, this is probably not the best decision because I might get hurt or I
Hmm.
might hurt somebody else or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think I
Well,
really
and it
figured
just
out who I was till I was like 30 or I'm
yeah,
30
I'm still
now. So,
figuring it out. Yeah.
Oh, I was early 30s,
yeah.
went through the whole like surrender thing, healing, I'm still in the midst of that. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Mhm.
And I think that's like one of the most beautiful things about having children is that children have this amazing ability to hold up a mirror in front of you and
Oh
show
yeah.
you like every single thing that,
Hmm.
is wrong with you. I mean, I know that's probably a little bit harsh and, maybe
Maybe just
triggers
things you
some
need to
people,
improve
but
on.
things that
Yeah.
you need to improve or things that are not serving you or
Hmm.
things that, yeah, you need to figure out about yourself.
Yeah.
But, some people will be like, oh my gosh, that's really terrifying about children. But for me, like that was the magic of having kids, because I don't know
Mhm.
where I would be if we had decided not to have children. I don't know where I would be because I don't think I would have ever invested in myself just because I felt like I deserved to. I brought children into the world and I decided, to bring them here, and so now this is my responsibility to teach them, to raise them, and I got to have my stuff together in order to do that for them. So it was only, by their being here that I was able to start working on myself.
And
I
well,
think
and
a
I
lot of
think like
parents will
it's
say that.
yeah, and like it's hard to like really, I would say, have it together before you have kids
Mhm.
because like you don't know the responsibility
Yep.
that goes into it, and then like not and this isn't in a bad way. This term gets the word selfish is always has a negative whatever, but like I feel like before we have kids, like we're kind of selfish individuals because we get to do what we want,
Absolutely.
and
Sure.
you don't realize like once you have kids, like you obviously don't get to do that, but then you start to realize how much more valuable it is to spend time on yourself and to spend time
Mhm.
working on
Absolutely.
yourself.
Mhm.
You have to become a better parent. Yeah.
Correct.
But also
And
I
part
think
of
you
that too
become
is being present like with yourself, whether it be by yourself or present like with, with your significant other.
Mhm.
So
And I don't think alcohol allows you to do that.
No,
exactly. No,
for
it doesn't.
sure.
There's
Yeah.
no way.
I
Well,
think
Now,
you become more like cathartic when you move into your 30s as well. Like you
mhm,
become more like you understand more about what your parents were talking to you about and you're like,
mhm,
"Oh, okay, like I understand what they're saying now."
yeah.
Wes, I did want to ask you one thing. So now that you don't drink, you've been alcohol free for over a year. What do you think was the biggest lie that you told yourself about alcohol when you were
Ooh, that's a good
drinking?
question.
That almost like I said, going back to like the unwinding. Well, hold on, you didn't text me this question.
I stumped you. I know. I just
I'm trying
impromptu
to
just
think of the biggest thing.
pulled it out of my hat.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. Uh, let's see. Probably like I would say that like I had like almost that I felt like I had to have it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't imagine doing things without having it. Like without like I couldn't imagine going to a sporting event without having it. I couldn't imagine going to a wedding without having it. I couldn't imagine
Yeah.
having a rough day without being able to come home and get a drink after. So I think for me it was hard to think about life without having it, and like the fact that like it benefited me and that I was old enough and mature enough to handle it and all this sort of
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. I would say, yeah. Along the same lines, like I think the biggest lie I told myself was it was not affecting my life, that I had it
Yeah, that's
under
a good one.
control. Yeah.
That's a good
Because
one.
you really don't, see it from a different perspective, obviously, until you're on the other side. And that's when you can be like, wow, it really did have control of my life. Again, even if you're not drinking every day and from the outside world, you don't have a problem, you can see that it was affecting you and there were problems because of your drinking. So,
Well,
yeah,
and it's
that's,
so prevalent. Like I'll go everywhere and like
Right.
I'll see like little airplane shooter bottles like on the ground, like off the road. Like there was a giant like a fireball bucket that was on the side of the road when I was driving earlier today, and like I think that I didn't really notice how prevalent it was in our society and how normalized it was in our society until I stopped, and that's when I was kind of like,
yeah.
"What's all around?" And heck, I got a neighbor who on their flagpole in the backyard they have a flag that says "cold beer," and I'm like just it's all it says. It says "cold beer."
Yeah.
I'm like, what are we doing? Uh-oh.
Okay. Okay.
Hold on, I got a guest that I have to grab.
That's be,
Bedhead all.
before we ended the show, we definitely had to get our nephew on here
Yes.
for
Absolutely.
a little FaceTime.
Hey,
He didn't nap for
buddy.
very long. Normally he'll nap for a couple hours, and he got about an hour in right now. So,
Poor
but yeah,
Franklin's had a rough week.
we'll have a movie afternoon. He'll probably sit here for a little bit, but yeah, I mean that's I. It's crazy to think of my life now without alcohol, and to think of how it was before, and just kind of like where I'm at as a person now, professionally, um, like the things that I'm doing, and just
Mhm.
it's crazy because I just never thought it would be like a thing. Like I never thought it'd be possible. Um,
Yeah, it impacts every single area of your life.
yeah. Well, and I'm just so much better off, and I know myself so much better, and
Hmm.
I can spend time with myself without having to have a distraction. I can sit outside, um, with just nature and just be. I can spend time with my wife. We can go out to eat and not have to get alcohol and enjoy and have a quality conversation. And I don't need that sort of like
Well, you're not focused on where your next drink is
yeah,
coming
like I don't need that
from.
social lubricant to like I
Yeah.
can just be who I am, and like I'm also kind of at peace with that in a sense of like I am who I am, and like people don't want to be around that or they don't appreciate that, then hey, that's fine. Like it is
That
what it is, sort of a thing. So
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
go ahead.
But yeah, that is like so empowering that you say, that you just get to be yourself and
Mhm.
that's it. Because once you stop drinking and you don't have anything to kind of yeah, be that social lubricant for you, like you're kind of forced to decide who you want to be and who you are and dive into that stuff. And it's really empowering to go into a social situation and just be like, I'm not
Hmm.
nervous. I'm not worried. I'm not because I know who I am 100% at my core.
Yeah,
And, you can have, you're comfortable having like the deep conversation. You're comfortable having, like you want to have that connection. And then hopefully, you're with people that want to have that heart connection with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean,
Wes,
and like you said, there is something to be said about how it feels to know that you don't like need that. Like and I can
Mhm.
be my truest self at all times. Like I don't have to try to sound like cool when I'm talking about bourbon or beer or whatever it might be.
Right.
I can be me and
Mhm. We
be
can
my
talk about
truest
functional
self.
mushrooms and psychedelics
Yeah,
and
yeah.
meditation and,
My
you know,
biggest thing
all
is
the
I love talking about mindset. Like I love talking
Yes.
about mindset,
Yeah.
cognitive growth, and
Yeah.
that's one thing that I've noticed a lot with sports. Whether I started umpiring, but like also since I quit drinking and doing my own sort of growth. Um,
Mhm.
no, I've really dove into like the mental stuff since I quit drinking
Mhm.
because I think that our brain is so powerful, and I don't think we give it enough credit.
Mhm.
And that was one of the things that I realized when I was drinking was I was giving my power, my emotions away to alcohol, to other people, to sports, to whatever it might be. And that's like, I mean, that's one of your most powerful things is your emotions because they dictate a lot, right? So
Yeah.
whenever you do that, like you're giving that power away, like you're giving somebody else that power,
Mhm.
as opposed to being able to just kind of keep it in check and be in control of yourself. So
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Wes, thank you so much for being on here.
I
So
think
proud of you, dude. Love you, man. Great
proud of you guys as
conversation.
well. This is great. I
Thank-
enjoy it. I appreciate you guys having me
Yeah,
on. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for listening. Hope you guys have a wonderful week.
thank you.